Well, Karolina, thank you so much for meeting with us this evening. I know that our listeners have not at all yet heard from someone in your career field. So I want you to share with us a little bit about who you are and how you got to be involved in space.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Actually, my name is Karolina. I studied psychology for a bachelor degree. For my associate's degree, I studied math and sciences. And for my research, actually, I was in France doing, plant psychology for the last 7 months. And I'm currently a student pilot. I got certified as an advanced scuba diver. And, I also worked on supporting the Mars sample return mission for NASA and the Science Mission Directorate. And I discovered that I was really passionate about psychology and engineering, but I didn't know that it was possible to merge the two until I was given an opportunity while I was an intern at NASA. And there was a nice supervisor who was asking students to join and participate in this project where they created lunar transport modules for incapacitated astronauts. But since I was a psychologist, I thought they were only looking for engineers, but I asked anyways if I can participate, and he was so kind and he said, of course you can, participate in this project. So thanks to that experience of him and allowing me to participate in this, project, I discovered that there was such a thing as human factors, which is psychology and engineering. And I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, right. I can see why. That's one of the few parts when they do space settlements, when Kevin works with the kids, that I actually, not only do I understand, but I can see the need for how something that we see here on Earth, we have these little microcosms that are actually even in vaster places. So what, when you're thinking about those human factors, what are some of the problems that we might see from a psychological aspect for people who are in space?
Oof. Well, there's a lot. Well, first of all, going into space is very scary. Even for the most bravest astronauts, first of all, you're going into a vacuum basically, and it's an infinity. It never ends. So that right there is just like, how prepared are you? It doesn't matter how much training you receive once you're there. It's like, oh my God, like, can you really prepare somebody for that until they experience it? You really can't. But what we could do is study how we can minimize the amount of error between human and machine interface. So the way they interact, for example, if you're putting a pilot in a cockpit, how do you make sure that the pilot doesn't hit the wrong button? How do they know? It's like they have to be like in an orchestra, they have the pilot and the first captain in command. So they have to know exactly where to press without making as much error as possible. So that's where we come in, the human factor psychologists.
That's very interesting. I'm going to back up just a little bit. You dropped two nice terms I want to ask you about again. First of all, you mentioned something about plant psychology in France. You did I hear that correctly? And if I did, I'm going to need an explanation. Second thing, I think we'd both like to know more about your intern experience at NASA. But first, let's go to plant psychology.
Sure. Okay, so in France, I was very honored to be part of this. There was a Mars analog called the She Habitat, and the She Habitat, I don't know if you've seen movies like The Martian, where they send the astronauts to live on Mars and in this little tiny home. And so I was doing my plant research there. I had my hydroponic system, and hydroponics is basically just plants without dirt. And the water runs through the roots and it circulates and it grows like really, really fast, and it grows and it yields a lot of food. And then on top of that, I worked with the microgreens, and I learned this because I was recommended by scientists from NASA. Like, they're telling me that, the International Space Station is actually looking at microgreens right now. When I looked at the research, I discovered, I learned from the reading that it yielded 40% more nutrients than any kind of like regular crop that you would grow up from dirt or from hydroponics itself. So I realized, I should be spending more time looking at microgreens because it yields faster, has more nutrients, and it's super, super easy to grow.
It's very interesting. I actually read a paper recently, and I was sharing with my students that NASA, they genetically engineered some lettuce to actually have a hormone related to bone regulation. So the idea is that the astronauts could eat the lettuce rather than take pills. If we can genetically modify plants to make the pharmaceuticals, the vitamins, as you said, the microgreens or the micronutrients we need, that's a much more sustainable way than trying to manufacture pills for like long-term space flight.
Exactly. Part of the research that I was trying to put emphasis on, so the title itself was The Psychology of Sustainable Agriculture for Future Martian Astronauts. And, people say all the time, oh, yeah, I feel relaxed when I garden. I don't know if you've experienced, during the quarantine and COVID, maybe you had like a little air garden or you had a big garden and you just started planting. Maybe that made you feel better, like more grounded to the earth. But I wanted to show like, having as much color in my garden as possible, having as much smell, as much taste as I can put together, like in a salad. I wanted a rainbow on a plate because I know like astronauts, when they're in the International Space Station, if you look at the food before, it was it didn't look very appetizing, and food plays a big factor when you're sharing a common meal with your crewmates. And even myself, when I make food at home, I notice when I see more smiles on the table, when I put rainbow on their plate, it makes people happy. So I wanted to show that that does make a difference in the research. And from the research that I've conducted, it does show a difference by putting color and smell and enclosing them with plants versus without plants.
This is fantastic. I've already decided I want you to speak to my teams because we do the tomato sphere and the plant the moon challenge, which is tomato sphere. They send seeds up to space, they irradiate them, and then they bring them down. And then plant the moon is where we're trying to grow food in regolith. Have you worked any with farming in regolith in your time with NASA?
Regolith? No, actually, my time at NASA had nothing to do with plants. This was actually in the last 7 months where I started doing the research related to plants and psychology. At NASA, it was more related to Mars sample and data management, working with, the rovers in Mars and collecting the data and putting it all together to share it with the NASA community.
Oh, very good. Were you in the Office of STEM Engagement or were you in a different office?
This was the Science Mission Directorate.
Got it. Very cool. Very cool. What was the most enjoyable, what did you enjoy most about your time as a NASA intern? And am I right? Have you concluded your internship period or are you still an intern?
Yeah, no, actually, this internship took place in August in 2021, right before I moved to France. So I guess the happiest, I would say, the people, most of all, are the ones that made the experience really special. Because not only was I given the opportunity to work on projects where, now it's more like about like education, like where, your degrees or how many certificates you have, but really, it's not really about how good of a test taker you are or, how well you do on paper. For example, my forte is not test taking, it's more research based. So I can show like I put a lot of enthusiasm into my work and I put a lot of pride in the quality of it. So I think they saw that at NASA. They see that in students, that those who are willing to excel, like it's like they give them that fertilizer, they push them to grow. And it's not like, like in different workplaces where it's like you have a dream and you kind of keep it to yourself because it's like a competition. At NASA, it's more like you tell them, for example, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. And they're just like, oh, really? Well, let me introduce you to someone you might be interested in talking to in the astronaut office, or someone who has, spoken to astronauts, dealing with their schedules, something like that. Like they'll just network you. And it's just like, it shows that it's not like a selfish environment. It's very open. And that to me is it's beautiful to have a group of people to work with who are so positive and optimistic.
So we have students who are listening, or parents even, and this is, of course, like you said, it wasn't like you had ever thought about combining these two passions that you have into that. How do you find like a school program or a school path that kind of allows you to specialize in this area? Like, in other words, if our listeners are thinking, hey, this might actually be something I want to do, what would be a track that they would look into?
So for space psychology, it's very hard to find space psychologists because, like the only place I'll actually find like these kind of people is in NASA or, space agencies. So I was also asking myself the same thing when I started. I was doing math and sciences and I was on a track towards I was gonna study medical, and I was very good at it. But at the same time, I decided maybe this wasn't for me. So I looked at psychology and I realized I was really good at psychology. But when I finally got the dream job that I thought I wanted and I earned finally, I was in my little cubicle and I realized I always had the International Space Station playing. And I had here my little astronaut behind me who always inspired me. And I would always look at my astronaut and I would think about what made me happy as a child. And I remember a time when my mom brought me outside to the backyard and she said, I want to show you something. And she made me look up at the sky. For the first time, I saw like the Gemini meteor shower. And I was like, wow, like there were so many stars, and that never left me since childhood. So I realized like I am not if I'm not happy in a job, then what's the point if you're not fulfilled? So that's when it occurred to me, I can mix what I have already, psychology and space. And I looked everywhere to find, what opportunities can I have? Is this even a thing? And I saw research papers and I started reaching out to scientists who focus on psychology and space. And they got back to me actually. And, I was able to network with them and get their guidance. And that's actually how I was able to find research and, the opportunity to do research in France. So you kind of have to, like, it's all about getting out there away from your comfort zone and reaching out to people, asking questions. The worst thing that can happen is they don't respond, or they say, okay, no, like there's no opportunity, and that's okay. You just keep going, you keep being persistent.
Right. So you're saying that you have to be risk tolerant, and not being afraid to fail helps.
Yeah.
But I would also posit, based on just what little we know about you, that you had done high quality work no matter what you were doing. And that enabled you to pivot without losing a lot of ground or having to start over, right? The fact that you were doing good work and you had a good reputation probably made it easier to pivot. I would share with you that I think that you need to work with space physiologists, right? The people that look at the whole animal, and you're the behavior side of it, and then they can do the biochemistry, and you bring those two together, and that would be, what do we see happening up there, and then what's the molecular basis for it? I think that would be a nice fit for you to be in space medicine, right? Psychology is just it's just a subset of space medicine, right? I think, but I think there's a lot of potential there, because we don't really know how people are going to do when they get so far away from the Earth that they can't see the Earth well. And you talked about the psychological impact of confined spaces and not a lot of colors. And I think I remember the astronauts tell me their tastes get dampened in space, right? Their noses get stuffy and food doesn't taste the same. And I think one of them said the first thing they wanted when they came home was pizza, right? Really nice pizza. But can you speak to maybe some of your research that you might have done that really interests you in the field of space psychology?
The research I've done, to be honest, most of the things that inspired me to focus on psychology was more like what I love doing. And my mom, I didn't like gardening at all in the beginning. It was actually my mom who introduced me, and she asked me to help her in the garden a couple of times. And I just wanted to be with my mom, so I would help her. And then, how do you start when you have so many plants and flowers to learn their names? And I learned that some of them like sunlight, some of them like shade, and it's a science in itself. And it's like, how do you learn all of this? You just start with little things, like you start with little seeds, and you learn that, okay, you can start with herbs if you like cooking. What is oregano? How does parsley grow? Like, how do they smell? And then from there you just start learning, like every flower has a name, it has its origin, where it comes from. To me, that's beautiful, and that's actually what inspired me to just do it, because it makes me happy.
I like what you were saying too about the different colors, right, on the rainbow. Yes, that's psychologically, but we know from a nutritional aspect as well, having that rainbow makes the insides happy. So I would be thinking to, like, if I were in this confined space, which would never be me, by the way, because I would be one of those people who would hyperventilate just at the thought about it, right? I could not. But I also think that I would be being away from those that I love would be a psychological factor. I think even the idea of where do I exercise to maybe release those endorphins becomes problematic. And just even having, like, can they just, like, if I even want to call up a WebMD now or get my counselor on the line from a psychological aspect, I can do that here. I wonder, is that available for astronauts when they're even in the ISS, to just call up and get counseling like we might hear on Earth?
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on this actually, but I do know that there are doctors in NASA that are there for their astronauts whenever they need. They also do psychological evaluations. They check them every day, make sure that they do their exercise, that they get enough hydration. And a lot of this you can actually see, like, if you watch Netflix, there's like a show called Away, and it shows a lot about the psychology, like what happens when they're in confined spaces. Like, you'll see one of the astronauts, they have like a psychosis where they just want to go home, and they want to go home. And it's happened in the past with, previous astronauts on the ISS. We don't know what it's like until we're actually on there, like I said before. So can you really judge them for how they're acting? Yeah.
Right. And I also hear it smells up there, right? That that ISS is its own microbiome. Think about it. Hundreds of people have come and gone, 20 years of bacteria, yeast, fungi, stuff growing everywhere. That's its own unique place. There's no place like that on Earth, right? As far as the flora, the microbes and things that live there. I have a question for you. What do you think, if you had to design a menu to be healthy in space, what do you think is the minimum number of plant species you would need if you had to get most of your protein from plants? Have you thought about what would be the ideal, menu, or the ideal? You're a farmer, right? Let's say you're a space farmer. What are the things that you know you're going to grow if you're in space?
Well, they've actually done a lot of research on like which plants grow the most. And I think there's also been student competition to see like, because you can't grow certain plants together because there's chemistry with them as well. Well, for sure, you definitely want tomatoes, you want some herbs, you want some, broccoli, you want things that are gonna give you like benefit you for your body. You want them to be multifunctional, you want them to have calcium, vitamins, as much iron as you can take in for them as well. So I don't know, the minimum, that's actually a very good question. I don't know what the minimum would be.
I know they're working on that, right? And I'm sure they are. I actually visited the kitchen once at Johnson where those ladies prepare the meals. And I know the astronauts go, like if they were going to space, they would go and sample and come up with their own menus if they were going to live on the ISS.
That would be a fun cooking show.
I
cooking in
think
space,
so,
right?
yeah.
Like it would be one of those like 30-minute shows where this is all we have here in the ISS. What are we gonna make?
Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
I think
Yeah,
so.
15 years ago, my daughter did a competition in high school where you created an energy bar, and the winner nationally, their bar became a food on the ISS. So, but you gave a lot of consideration, like you said, to the composition and types of nutrients, how many carbs are you going to put in it? I think they only allowed you to use honey. You couldn't use like pure sugar to sweeten it, but you could use honey, for instance.
Well, speaking of nutrients, and like this is just a question because you had said most of the plants are hydroponically grown, right? So there's no soil in that respect. So how do plants if they're growing that way, how would they get the normal nutrients that we normally ascribe to those particular plants?
Are you asking me about the plants here on Earth?
No, well, I mean, I know I thought you meant, and maybe I misunderstood. Like if we were talking about growing something in space, the idea would be hydroponically, right? Whether it's here on Earth or whether it's there, how do we get the nutrients in there if there's no soil? And I guess it could be here or there.
So for hydroponics, excuse me, just lost the page there. So for hydroponics, on Earth with gravity, we put like nutrients, a little bit of plant food to give it that boost that it needs. In space, we also use fertilizer. I believe we also have different methods. I heard that they use like vapor as well, a vapor method where they spray the roots. But also I was thinking too, like, hydroponics work great if you're on Earth. I mean, because you have water, the gravity works, but what about space? If you can't really use that in space, because if the water passes through the roots, it'll just stick to the roots and eventually the roots are going to rot. So that doesn't really work. And that's why microgreens are very helpful too, because microgreens, they grow like, within 4-7 days, and you just you chop them and then you put them in your sandwich and then they just keep growing and growing.
Right.
Yeah, I think like a gelatin material might be interesting. I think I'm going to have some of my kids maybe do some experiments with putting the roots in gelatin or some sort of like a diaper material, that's real absorbent that will hold lots of water and slowly let the water release to the roots. There's many neat things like that going on. If you ever come to Florida again, there's a space life sciences building at Kennedy Space Center, and I have seen the greens that you speak of. That's where they were testing that hardware out before they took it up to the ISS. Lots of plant experiments at the Space Life Sciences building.
Oh yeah, I have heard of that. All the plant experiments are in Kennedy Space Center, and wow, like I've never been to Kennedy Space Center.
What?
Believe it or not, yeah, I know. I was in Jacksonville and I didn't have the opportunity. I was so young, and at that time, space was not. It was just, I would see the little rockets going up, but at that time I thought it was like, a dream to be an astronaut, like it's impossible, but it's not impossible. People are doing it now. And even now with the private aerospace industries, like they're sending more and more people up into space.
Right. And it's not just about being an astronaut. I think that's always a misconception people have is, oh, okay, aerospace just means astronaut. No. And as you're proving, every single sector as far as a job that we have here that we might be passionate about can be applied there. So this has been really, I think it'll be eye-opening for many of our listeners as well.
Yes. So what are your future plans as far as schooling? We know you're going to become a pilot. What is the, it sounds like if you're a scuba pilot, you speak Russian. I mean, that's the,
You could be an astronaut.
that's the, you know, for some of us that applied, you know, the 20 years ago before you were born, I applied 2 or 3 times, but I know the checklist, right? Scuba, you gotta have a master's in STEM, a scuba, speak Russian, pilot's license doesn't hurt. Honestly, if you're an academy grad and a test pilot, that didn't hurt either. So is it safe to say you're hoping to become an astronaut one day?
Well, yes, I think I definitely would like to become an astronaut someday. And, you know, I do get a lot of, you know, reality checks from people telling me, you know, it's not realistic to be an astronaut. And after thinking about it, yeah, it's hard to even consider, okay, like, can I be an astronaut? But for me, I think it's more about the journey, getting there, regardless if you make it or not. If I don't make it, I can still help other people make it.
Oh, you're going to have a lot of fun too. That's what I found is you can't set out to be one. I agree with you. You just have to be the best human you can be in the things that you love. And if so, that's what I've always heard. If you're really good at what you love and you're doing well in those lanes, somebody may notice, right? But Christina Koch, the lady from NC State, my alma mater, she just spent about a year up on the space station. She was one of the 2 women. Remember, they couldn't find suits where 2 women could spacewalk at one time because
we didn't make the suits for women.
The suits are made for, but she was like only one of the 8 in her class that weren't military, right? They were all military except for her. But I applaud your, you know, the goal is a good one, right? You should keep the goal and do as much fun things as you can and enjoy the ride. And it's not up for you to decide anyway, right? You don't get to choose. You can only, you know, you can only play that hand that you're dealt, right? And be very good. I think that's what NASA really wants, is they want people that are very good at what they do and that they work well with others. I feel like that's important.
Isn't it also the case that, like, as we point out with these private industries now, it may well be that there are possibilities that you can do that not through NASA in
Absolutely.
the future.
Number one, if you're rich, you can go to space right now, you know, but for the rest of us, you know, what I'm waiting for is that really well-meaning billionaire that says, I want to fly 1,000 teachers or, you know, 10,000 teachers. 15 years ago, we all got to fly 0G because they made ways for teachers to fly the vomit comet with experiments. So that was fun. So what's in your future though? I'm sorry, we got sidetracked a little, but what are your plans?
For me right now, I really want to take one step at a time. I just got scuba certified for NAWI advanced training. I would like to be a dive master. For me, diving is just something that relaxes me. It really helps me when I'm really, really stressed out. Just me, I was in Germany and I met like a whole wonderful community. Like they all became like family to me. They basically adopted me while I was in France because I was at the border. So whenever I was stressed at school, I would go across the border to Germany and there would be my German family waiting for me to go diving. So it also teaches you to be more a team player, because diving is never done alone because it's too dangerous to do. So you always have to have a buddy with you. So when you're underwater, you're always making sure you're making eye contact with the person. And you know what? It's funny because my dive master spoke mostly German. He barely spoke, English. So we had a barrier, a cultural barrier there, but underwater, we all understand each other because we're all giving each other signs. So it's like a universal thing. So that to me is what draws me to scuba diving. So for me, that's part of my future. I would like to be a dive master and share that skill with other people as well. And then there's aviation. I would love to become a commercial pilot, to gain the experience to travel the world because I love traveling. Mm-hmm. And, at the same time, I can't give up on my dreams too, because I want to continue no matter what. And I want to be able to share that with other people, because for me, this is like my joy. And I love that you're working with, students most of all, because that is our future. They are the future and we need to inspire them. And me personally, I think we should put more emphasis on training them to go into space because they're more adaptable. They are, since they're so young, they can learn so quickly. and I wonder, we're training astronauts who are much older and, in their career. But once you're, like a teenager, you're 12, let's say, and you're always learning something new and you can pick it up so quickly. That's my take. I think we should be putting more emphasis on children to go so that they can last, have many more years in space.
So you want an astronaut corps that's sort of like the Boy Scouts or the Girl
No,
Scouts,
yeah.
where you start training in this like the Scouts are.
Yeah, prepare them because space is moving so quickly right now. Like we're in what a time to be alive, right? Like, we're seeing people go to space, and who knows, maybe children will be able to go to space as well.
Well, they have said, and a couple of books have been written about the kids in our classrooms. They are the future Martians. There are kids alive right now who will be the ones there. So
yes, we work with kids from India on a coding hackathon. We travel all over the world with our students. We are excited to try to motivate them and inspire them to get in the STEM pipeline and not to leak out. So I think meeting people like you, right, that are just a little bit older than the kids are, that
really helps them.
Yes, they very quickly look up to people like you and say, if she can do it, I think I can do it.
Before we get to the final question, which is really just about any final words or advice that you might have, I want to recommend too, and you probably have already done this, but there's so many conferences that your idea on space psychology and your true love for doing what you enjoy, but sharing that passion with others, the idea of the community that is so important to you. If you're not already publishing, I think you could easily with some of your ideas. So, there are a couple of conferences I'm sure Kevin can tell you about that we'd love to have you come meet us at one day.
We need you to become part of the wolf pack. You can be like part of our pack. We go all over. So
I would love to.
We'll give you everything that you need to join us there. So we always end, as I said, with some advice for some of either our students who are listening, who are now inspired, going, wow, I had no idea I could blend things that that I didn't see connected, or even parents, or even we might have some teachers as well. So what are some words that you have for them about how to pursue their passions?
I would say, don't be afraid to fail, and don't listen to others. If they, whatever they say, they can say whatever they want, but what matters is what you want to do. If it makes you happy, if you can imagine yourself doing it, do it, and just continue. Don't stop.
We really appreciate that. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I know that we're going to continue talking with you again soon, but thank you for your time tonight.
And thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.